Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and greetings to Sir and Madam. My name is Nur Syafiqah binti Abdul Aziz and my metric number is 2180717. For today, I am going to present about my final year project entitled Familiarity of Sign Language amongst non-sign language users. Sign language is a popular foreign language in the Western countries such as United Kingdom, America, and Australia, which they acknowledge sign language as their second or third language. Not only that, they teach sign language from kindergarten level up till university level. Malaysia also have its own sign language called Malaysian Sign Language or MSL, but it is not quite popular as those in the Western countries. So this research focuses on non-sign language users' familiarity with sign language that involves students from National Defence University of Malaysia. Next, we move on to problem statement. In problem statement, we recognize the issues regarding communication gap between hearing and non-hearing individuals. These issues in the gap are such parents who are in denial of their children's speech or hearing impairments and impractical use of communication tools such as whiteboard markers or phones, which we don't usually have it on us 24/7. But I want to focus the issues on Malaysia, which most students with speech or hearing impairments usually don't further their studies because most universities in Malaysia usually cover those with these disabilities. This in a way becomes an obstacle for these students because they cannot pursue their study. Not only that, most universities does not implement sign language in their courses. That is why it became an obstacle for these disability students. This results in communication gap between hearing and non-hearing students because these hearing students, they are not used to be around people who are mute or deaf. So when they do meet them, their social interaction can be quite awkward and distant, thus creating non-friendly sign language environment because these hearing people are unable to communicate using sign language and these deaf people are unable to communicate better with those with hearing. There are three research objectives for this research, which are the first one is to identify people's awareness towards the use of sign language, to determine the reasons people are not learning sign language, and the third one is to identify the importance of learning sign language. I'll move on to literature review. In literature review, we will look at 5 things that are tools for sign language, research on sign language in Malaysia, the deaf community, theoretical framework, and conceptual framework. For the first one, that is tools for sign language, it means that the things that we use to communicate with these deaf people or people with hearing impairments or speech impairments. So the most common tools that we use are our hands. It is called hand signs. And other than that, we can also use our phone to type whatever we want to convey to that person, or we can jot down on a piece of paper, or if we have a whiteboard marker with us, we can also jot down and convey our message to them, and they can also jot down whatever they want to say to us. That is called tools for sign language, our tools for communication. Next is research on sign language in Malaysia. Research on sign language in Malaysia have found that the way we speak and the way we interpret it into sign language has a reduce in vocabulary. For example, what is your cat's name? So in sign language, it is interpreted as you, cat, name, what. So the vocabulary when we speak and the way we interpret it into sign language are different from each other. That is what is found on MSL, Malaysian Sign Language. And the third one is the deaf community, which there are two meanings for the deaf. The first one is the deaf, which the D, the letter D, is with a lowercase which indicates the disabilities or the illness itself, the impairments, the inability to hear anything. And the other one is the deaf with uppercase letter D, which represents the community of the deaf. Moving on, I'm going to explain about theoretical framework. I'm using cognitive learning theory, which consists of stimulus, cognitive processes, and response. So this theory explains about how when we see something new or we see something, it will stimulate our senses and our brain will be working on how to respond to it, thus generate a response. This is similar to sign language because when the mute or the deaf wanted to convey something, their senses will be generated and their brain will process whatever they want to convey. Thus, will generate a response which they convey their message using a hand signs or sign language. For conceptual framework, there are three independent variables and only one dependent variable. The three independent variables are familiarity of sign language, reasons for not learning sign language, and importance of learning sign language. And the only dependent variables in this conceptual framework is sign language awareness. For methodology, the method that I'm using for this research is quantitative research method, and my population is NUM students. For my sample, I used 330 year 3 students of NUM because it is more practical. And for data collection, I'm using online questionnaires because of the COVID-19 pandemic. As for data analysis, I'm using three analyses, which are descriptive analysis, reliability analysis, and inferential analysis. Results for these three analyses will be shown in the next slides for the discussion of findings. For discussion of findings, we'll focus one by one, starting off with descriptive analysis. So in this analysis, we'll focus on section B, section C, and section D only. In section B, it is familiarity of sign language. There are 10 questions, which 5 of them are alphabets and 5 of them are numbers. And it is aided with graphics that shows hand signs according to the numbers and the alphabets given. So only 41.69% answered it correct, while more than half of them answered the questions wrong, which indicates that more than half of the year 3 students, the respondents, are not familiar with the simple sign language such as numbers and alphabets. For section C, it is reasons for unfamiliarity. So for this section, after it is being analyzed by SPSS version 23, I got 2.44, which is a low mean level for the questions. And for section B, the importance of learning sign language, I got 4.23, which is a very high mean level. For reliability analysis, we will focus on section C and section D only, and it is being analyzed in using SPSS version 23 also. And for section C, I got 0.771, which it is a good alpha value, while in section D, I got 0.902, which is an excellent alpha value. For inferential analysis, I am comparing the independent variables and dependent variables, which results in, for section B, we got 0.021, which is slight and positive. For section C, I got 0.188, which is slight and positive. And for section D, I got negative 0.072, which is slight and negative. The implication of this study is, first, non-sign language users can explore more about sign language roles in situations that requires non-verbal communication. Examples of situations that requires non-verbal communication is when military force or police force went for an operations that requires them to make minimal verbal communication. This is where sign language or non-verbal communication plays its parts. Next is raise awareness among students about the importance of sign language. By raising awareness about the importance of sign language and the sign language itself. This, in a way, helps students to be more appreciative of what they have, and they can be more helpful towards those who suffer with these disabilities. Last but not least, the implication of this study is be more mindful towards the problems of linguistics and cultural relativism when using sign language, because sign language is not a generalized language. Every country has its own sign language. Not only that, every state have its own style of sign language, and every culture have its own style of sign language. That is why we need to learn, we need to know about the country, the state, the culture of the people for us to understand them better. My suggestions for further research are: research conduct must be able to cover more extensive region, and larger scale of respondents are needed to obtain a generalized result. This is because my research only focuses on NUM, and my sample size is for U3 NUM students only. That is why we need a bigger sample size, because mine was a smaller scale, so we need a bigger scale to get a more generalized result. Not only that, instead of focus on NUM only, we can also include other universities in Malaysia as well, including in the East Coast Malaysia, and including East Coast and West Coast Malaysia. Lastly, different sign language from various languages can be included. As I said before, there are no generalized sign language, so we can compare our sign language, which is Malaysian sign language, with other sign language. For example, American sign language, because Malaysian sign language actually comes from American sign language, but they do have their own differences that differentiate them. That is why, for further research, for future researcher, I would suggest that they include these differences between sign languages, so that people can be more aware and knowledgeable about the various languages in sign language. Throughout my study, I've learned that there are still many people who are unaware and unfamiliar with sign language. Even though they acknowledge the importance of sign language, they find it hard to learn. I've also learned that by learning sign language, we can be more appreciative to the deaf culture, thus promote understanding and acceptance of the language, among others. Before I end my presentation, I would like to read a quote by Marilyn Daniels, which she says, "Sign language is a dance with words, to be enjoyed from babyhood through childhood to adulthood." That's all from me. Thank you.